After 18 months of sand, gunfire, and counting the days one heartbeat at a time, I came home expecting the kind of reunion you see in those heartstring-tugging viral videos. You know the ones, soldiers surprising their families, kids bursting into tears, wives collapsing into their arms. I'd replayed it in my mind 1,000 times. My son Jacob would come running, probably taller now. My wife Amanda would cry, kiss me, wrap her arms around me like the world had stopped spinning. What I walked into instead was the scent of someone else's cologne, sharp, cocky, and completely unfamiliar. Not a trace of the lavender candles Amanda used to light. Not even the dog's bark. Just silence, stale air, and a feeling in my gut like I'd stepped on a landmine and hadn't realized it yet. The living room didn't even look like ours anymore. The couch had been moved. My grandfather's clock was gone. Photos from vacations and Jacob's school plays had vanished, replaced by generic artwork that felt like it belonged in a staged real estate showing. It was like I'd stepped into someone else's house wearing my memories like a blindfold. And then he appeared. Shirtless. Smug. Built like a guy who spends too much time curling dumbbells in the mirror. He looked at me like I was the intruder. Like I'd trespassed into his domain. I couldn't place his face, but the way he moved through my living room made it clear he didn't need an introduction. His confidence wasn't just in his body, it was in his assumption that I didn't belong there. And he told me so. Calmly. Like it was routine. Like he'd rehearsed it. The words hit harder than enemy fire. My feet didn't move, but my brain was already screaming. This had to be a mistake. Amanda wouldn't, she couldn't, right? But then she came out. Not in a rush. Not in tears. Not even surprised. Just casual, in a silk robe I'd never seen before, with a look that made me feel like a door-to-door salesman she hadn't invited. There wasn't even a flicker of warmth in her eyes. If anything, she looked annoyed. She told me I didn't live there anymore. Just like that. The woman I'd fought to come home to was already gone. I just hadn't gotten the memo. I asked about Jacob. I barely recognized my own voice when I said his name. It sounded like it belonged to a different man. A man who still believed. She told me he'd left. Gotten into trouble and disappeared. Said she hadn't heard from him in months. Her tone was offhand, like she was talking about a roommate who forgot to pay rent. Not her son. Not my son. No details. No emotion. Just vague, cold indifference. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. The house was different. Amanda was different. Jacob was gone. And somehow this smug stranger had claimed everything I thought I was coming home to. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch or make a scene. The kind of chaos they were probably expecting. The kind they could twist into a headline or a police report. No. I'd spent too long learning how to control my breathing when the world collapsed around me. Instead, I turned around and walked out. The door clicked behind me like a gun being holstered. That first night, I drove with no destination. The city blurred past my window as I tried to understand how the world had shifted without me. How everything I held on to during firefights and freezing desert nights had unraveled in my absence. Every mile put more distance between me and the home that no longer felt like mine. Eventually, I ended up in a rundown bar on the edge of town. The kind of place where the lights are dim, the bartenders don't ask questions, and the only thing louder than the silence is the weight you bring with you. I sat at the counter, nursing a beer I couldn't taste, my duffel bag on the stool beside me like an unwanted reminder. Around me, laughter and conversation floated by like static. None of it reached me. The numbness in my chest was worse than pain. Pain is something you can work with. Pain means you still feel. I kept thinking about how easily Amanda had said it. Like she'd rehearsed that line for months. Like she couldn't wait to say it. Like she'd already written me out of the script. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. Everything I'd worked for, protected, bled for, it was gone. Not just physically. Mentally, emotionally, legally, if what she'd said was true. And the worst part was, I didn't even know what was real yet. Where was Jacob really? Who was this Nick guy? How long had it been going on? Did the others know? Had my own son been left to fend for himself while I was overseas getting shot at and writing letters home? My head was spinning, but deep down a part of me began to sharpen. I knew that feeling. The quiet before a mission. The click of gears falling into place. I wasn't just some guy who got cheated on. I was a soldier. And if there was one thing I knew how to do better than survive, it was plan. The battlefield might have changed, but the rules were the same. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to punch holes in walls or sit in the corner licking wounds. I was going to find my son. I was going to take back what was mine. And Amanda. Amanda had no idea who she was really at war with. The bar smelled like old leather and spilled regrets. I was 2 beers in, still staring at the condensation on the glass like it might rearrange itself into answers, when I heard someone say my name. Not Matt like Amanda used to say it when she wanted something. Not Sergeant Holt like it sounded in the field. Just Matthew, plain and steady, like an anchor in a storm. Richard had aged, sure, but he still looked like the guy I used to swap rations and war stories with under desert moons. There was wear in his eyes, but also the kind of grit that only comes from surviving too much and losing too many. He sat down beside me like no time had passed, and I told him everything. The house. Amanda. The man. The lie about Jacob. Each word left a bitter taste, but it also made the picture clearer. He didn't interrupt. Just listened. Jaw tight. Occasionally nodding. When I was done, he leaned back and said what I had already started to suspect, that this wasn't just about cheating or pride. This wasn't about a failed marriage. It was something else entirely. Something calculated. According to Richard, Amanda had been siphoning off my deployment pay for months. Military spouses can access allotments if they're on file. And I'd been foolish enough to trust her with everything, bank info, logins, even my power of attorney when I left. Turns out she'd used it all. And not for Jacob. Not for bills. Not for survival. But to bankroll her new life with the guy who had replaced me in every possible way, except honor. And Jacob? He hadn't just left town like she claimed. Richard had contacts, a few guys who still ran community ops. It didn't take long for them to whisper what Amanda would never say out loud. Jacob had been seen running with a local gang, one known for picking up lost kids. Kids whose parents stopped paying attention. Kids like mine. That hit harder than anything. I could stomach losing a house. I could even swallow the betrayal. But my son? Left behind and lured into the kind of life I'd sworn I was fighting to prevent. That broke something inside me I didn't know I had left. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a battlefield, but the fog had lifted. I had a new mission now. One that mattered more than all the ones before. Find Jacob. Reclaim my home. Expose Amanda for what she really was, not just a cheater, but a negligent mother and a thief. By sunrise, I wasn't a broken husband anymore. I was a man with a plan. I didn't storm the house. No raised voices. No fists. Just me, clean-shaven, calm, and wearing a button-down shirt that Amanda had bought me years ago, probably thinking it made me look less military. That felt appropriate. Let her see how composed vengeance could look. Nick answered the door again, smug as ever. But there was a flicker, just a flicker, of something behind the eyes when he saw I hadn't come unglued. He said something, probably rehearsed. Amanda appeared behind him, her face shifting through expressions as fast as her lies used to come. Surprise, worry, something like fake compassion, then that same cold mask she'd worn the first night. She offered me a deal, tried to make it sound civil. Like we could just work things out and go our separate ways. It was almost impressive how easily she could pivot to charm. She probably thought I was desperate. That I still had feelings. That I'd crumble at the first hint of softness. But I wasn't that man anymore. I gave them 24 hours. Not a request. Not a plea. Just a fact. One that hung heavy in the silence between us after I said it. Amanda's smile twitched, just slightly. Nick laughed, loud, cocky, the way a man does when he's trying to cover for the sudden pit in his stomach. They thought I was bluffing. That I'd go back to my truck and disappear again. That I didn't have the spine to do what needed doing. I turned and walked away, my boots hitting the pavement like war drums. Behind me, I could feel their confidence wobble. Not collapse, not yet. But it was coming. Later that morning, I met Richard at a cafe we used to hit back when life felt normal. He had news. Bad, but necessary. Jacob had been seen near an old warehouse on the edge of town, one of those half-condemned places where nobody asks questions and the cops stay out unless there's a body. The gang had gotten their hooks in deep. He'd likely been running jobs, nothing too serious yet, but enough to scar a kid for life if someone didn't pull him out soon. Even worse, the money Amanda had burned through wasn't just from my paychecks. She'd sold some of my old gear. Maxed out shared credit cards. Opened new accounts in both our names. Financially, I was a ghost in my own identity. It wasn't incompetence. It was a plan. She never thought I'd come back early. Maybe never at all. I was more useful to her deployed, or dead, than sitting at our kitchen table. But Amanda made one fatal mistake, she assumed silence meant weakness. I wasn't going to break down in front of them. I wasn't going to post a rant online or cry into a bottle. I'd trained for chaos. I knew how to wait, how to watch, how to move when the time was right. And the time was coming fast. That night, I stood across the street from the house again. Lights on, silhouettes moving behind the curtains. They probably thought they were untouchable. That the world they'd built on lies would hold. That I'd go away, again. They had 24 hours left. I hoped they used them well. By the time the sun began to dip behind the trees the next evening, the house I'd once called home was already cast in shadow. It looked different in the fading light. Not like a place where memories lived, but like a crime scene frozen in time. My boots hit the pavement with steady rhythm, each step deliberate. I wasn't there for a conversation. I wasn't there to argue or reason. I'd given them the warning. This was the reckoning. The front door was unlocked, just like the first time. That arrogance again. As if nothing could touch them. As if I was just some uninvited ghost from a past they thought they'd buried. The cologne hit me before I even cleared the threshold. That same sharp, synthetic musk that had no right clinging to my furniture. I moved through the hall slowly, taking in the still familiar shapes. The couch, the television, a lamp Amanda had always said didn't match anything. It all sat there like a twisted museum exhibit of what my life used to be. Except now, it wasn't mine. Not yet. Nick's voice came first, ringing out from the living room with that performative confidence he wore like armor. He was sprawled out like he owned the place, his legs kicked up, drink in hand, every bit the squatter king. And then he saw me. There was a beat of hesitation, the smallest glitch in his smirk. I didn't flinch. I didn't answer the bait. He stood up, squared his chest like it might intimidate me. He started in with whatever tough guy act he'd rehearsed, chest puffed, jaw clenched. But something in his stance betrayed him. He wasn't expecting the way I moved. Years of training honed for moments like this, not in war, but in precision. I stepped forward and dropped him with one clean punch, square to the jaw. No flourish, no hesitation. Just the sound of bone meeting conviction. His body hit the floor with a graceless thud, the arrogance leaking out of him like air from a slashed tire. Amanda appeared in the doorway seconds later. The scream was instant, more from shock than concern. She looked down at Nick like a broken investment, then back at me, already reaching for her phone. The theatrics began. Threats, legal jargon, warnings she probably Googled earlier that day. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly reached into my jacket and pulled out the thick folder I'd prepared. It wasn't just documents, it was a declaration. Page after page of bank records, unauthorized withdrawals, credit card debt she'd racked up under both our names. Not to mention the notarized testimony from Jacob's teacher about missed parent meetings, empty lunch accounts, and weeks he'd gone without basic school supplies. Her negligence wasn't a theory anymore. It was papered in black and white. Amanda froze. Her fingers, mid-dial, curled slowly around the phone. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. The silence between us said more than anything ever could. Nick, groaning on the floor, sat up just long enough to read the room. His smirk was gone. So was his presence. He pulled himself upright and shuffled toward the hallway, muttering curses under his breath that even he didn't seem to believe anymore. Amanda didn't follow. She collapsed onto the couch like a puppet with its strings cut, face pale, hands trembling. I didn't need to say anything else. The house was mine again. But the victory felt hollow. The air still smelled like him. Her perfume still clung to the pillows. My son's laughter hadn't echoed off those walls in months. And reclaiming a house meant nothing if I didn't know where Jacob was, or if he was even okay. That night, Richard and I followed the trail. One of his contacts had finally come through with a location, a condemned warehouse on the south edge of town, barely within city limits. The place was known for being a hangout spot for the kind of people who didn't want to be found. Runaways, small-time dealers, lost kids who needed somewhere to feel like they belonged, even if it cost them everything. It was late, the streets empty and the building darker than night itself. The windows were boarded. The alley smelled like mold, piss, and burned rubber. As we stepped inside, the silence was thick. Every creak of floorboard felt like a siren. The place was a maze of shadows, and every one of them looked like a threat. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't leaving without my son. We found him in the back. A small room with a single flickering bulb and walls covered in graffiti. He was slumped in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, arms crossed like they were the only thing holding him together. His face had changed, older somehow. Shadows under his eyes. Cheekbones sharper than I remembered. But it was Jacob. My Jacob. When he looked up and saw me, something in his expression cracked. Not fear. Not relief. Just disbelief. Like I was a hallucination too cruel to be real. He started to cry, quietly at first. Then his body shook as he tried to speak. The words came out in broken pieces, apologies, explanations, shame. He told me about Amanda's absence, about Nick's cruelty, about the hunger, the loneliness. He told me about the gang, how they had promised him food, money, protection. How easy it had been to fall into it when no one else seemed to care. But what broke me wasn't what he said. It was what he believed. He thought I'd hate him for it. That part of him thought I'd come back and see nothing but failure. That I'd be ashamed. That I'd turn away. I didn't. I reached for him and pulled him close. I didn't care about the dirt on his clothes or the tear-streaked face. He was my son. And he mattered more than Amanda's betrayal ever would. More than Nick's fists, more than the house, more than my pride. He clung to me like a boy who'd been drifting at sea and had just seen land for the first time in months. We didn't speak much on the ride home. Richard drove in silence, his eyes sharp in the rearview mirror. I kept a hand on Jacob's shoulder the whole way, not because I thought he'd run, but because he needed to know I wasn't going anywhere. Back at the house, our house now, I opened the door and let him step inside first. He paused in the doorway, taking in the familiar walls, the couch, the hallway where he used to race toy cars. The silence between us didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt whole. The house wasn't healed. Not yet. But neither were we. Still, the war had changed. And I was no longer fighting it alone. The legal battle was never just going to be about custody or property. From the moment Amanda and Nick realized I wasn't backing down, it became a war of perception. And in a small town, perception moves faster than facts ever will. Nick took the lead. He may have vanished from the house, but not from the picture. His smear campaign started quietly, whispers at the gym, muttered conversations over coffee, subtle nods in the church parking lot. It didn't take long for the rumors to ripple. They painted me as a damaged man, unstable from war, emotionally distant, quick to anger. Stories spread like oil on water, how Amanda feared for her safety, how Jacob had run away from me, how deployment had twisted me into someone dangerous. People I'd known for years started giving me second looks in the grocery store. Some turned away. Others offered hollow smiles, unsure of what to believe. Amanda played her role to perfection, pale, teary-eyed, always flanked by her lawyer or a sympathetic neighbor. She'd mastered the art of controlled vulnerability, leaking just enough false humility to play the part of the wounded spouse. I didn't react. Not publicly. No statements, no outbursts, no threats. Instead, I went to work. I started collecting my own army, not of soldiers, but of witnesses. Real ones. People who knew me before, during, and after deployment. My commanding officer sent a notarized letter outlining my conduct, my leadership, and my psychological evaluations, all clean. A couple of former squad mates drove into town just to back me up in person. Even my old high school coach, now retired, volunteered to testify on my character. Neighbors who had seen Amanda's new life unfold during my absence stepped forward, one even had dated receipts showing the sudden spike in deliveries and male visitors. Teachers from Jacob's school gave statements about his changes in behavior, the missed meetings, the absence of any parental involvement until after I returned. The picture they painted wasn't just inconvenient for Amanda, it was damning. Still, she pushed forward. Her lawyer was slick, the type that smiled too much and wore suits just a little too shiny. They leaned hard into the PTSD narrative. The story was simple and ugly, I'd gone off to war a hero and come back a ticking time bomb. Amanda, the devoted wife, had tried to hold the family together, but I'd grown cold and violent. She hadn't cheated, she'd escaped. The courtroom was packed by the time the trial began. Curious townsfolk filled the benches, some driven by loyalty, others by pure appetite for drama. The judge, an older man with a reputation for patience and precision, sat like a stone, unmoved by the theatrics. Amanda played her role well. She wore softer colors, kept her makeup minimal. Her voice trembled in all the right places. Her lawyer painted a portrait of a woman doing her best to raise a troubled son while tethered to a man who'd become emotionally volatile, possibly dangerous. I didn't flinch. I let them speak. Let the image form. And then I let it burn. My lawyer, Sarah, dismantled their claims with quiet ruthlessness. She introduced the financial records, the power of attorney violations, the unexplained withdrawals. She handed the judge documents showing how Amanda had rerouted my military pay into a secret account. She brought out the statements from the teachers and neighbors. And finally, the photo evidence, Nick's car in my driveway, over and over, time-stamped across the months I was supposed to be the absent husband. Still, it was Jacob who changed everything. When he took the stand, the room changed. The gossip stopped. The silence became tense. He wasn't a child anymore. He'd grown up fast, and it showed in how he sat, how he spoke, how he didn't flinch under his mother's gaze. He told the truth, steady, measured, and heartbreaking. He talked about the days when Amanda stopped cooking, when Nick started staying over. About the times he asked for help with homework and was told to figure it out. About being alone for hours, sometimes days. About the gnawing hunger, both in his stomach and in his chest. He spoke of the gang, the way they'd made him feel seen when no one else did. How they gave him a jacket, a name, a place, even if it came with darkness. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for pity. He just told the truth. And when he finished, the room was still. Amanda looked smaller afterward, like something inside her had cracked. But even then, she wasn't done. Desperation has a way of stripping people bare. Late one evening, while the trial was still underway, she made a final mistake. She approached one of our key witnesses, Jacob's old math teacher, Mrs. Jensen. It was in the parking lot behind the school, no one else around. Amanda offered her an envelope and pleaded with her to recant. Said the past was fuzzy. Asked her to forget. She should have known better. The next morning, that same envelope landed on the judge's desk. Unopened, along with a sworn statement from Mrs. Jensen detailing the entire conversation. That was the moment Amanda's story collapsed. From that point forward, the courtroom belonged to the truth. Her lawyer stumbled, pivoted, tried to soften the blow, but the damage was done. The judge's tone changed. His questions grew sharper. The observers in the back stopped whispering and started nodding, toward me. Nick disappeared after that. Left town entirely. Word was he skipped out to avoid being subpoenaed. No surprise. When the foundation cracked, the rats scattered. Amanda sat through the remainder of the trial with her hands in her lap, no more trembling voice, no more practiced glances toward the judge. She looked like someone who had built a lie so well, she'd started to believe it, and was now choking on the truth. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Because the truth isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. And clarity, finally, was on my side. The courthouse felt colder that morning. The buzz from the early trial days had faded, replaced by the kind of silence that meant everyone was waiting for something final. The crowd had thinned but not disappeared, a few loyal neighbors, some curious onlookers, a few familiar faces from the local paper. They all came for the conclusion, to see how the story ended. I sat at the front, not fidgeting, not glancing around, just still. Jacob sat beside me, not quite calm, but composed. His hands were clenched, not from fear, but from anticipation. He had carried more than any teenager should have. No matter what the judge said, I already knew he'd done his part. He'd stood up. He'd told the truth. That mattered more than anything. Across the room, Amanda looked like a shadow of the woman she'd once been. Her tailored clothes were still neat, but the way she sat told the real story, shoulders slumped, lips pressed tight, hands folded too tightly in her lap. The calm had been drained from her. The poise was gone. Nick, as expected, was nowhere to be seen. He'd slipped out of town the moment things turned against them, leaving Amanda to face the fallout alone. When the judge entered, the air shifted. There was no need for theatrics. No one expected speeches. The facts had been laid bare. Now came the verdict. The ruling was delivered in the same even tone the judge had used throughout the trial, but every word landed with finality. Full custody of Jacob awarded to me, citing Amanda's prolonged neglect, financial misconduct, and the clear emotional bond between father and son. Sole ownership of the house, too, no split, no negotiation. The military pension. Untouchable. Amanda's claim to any of it was rejected. Then came the hammer. The judge referred Amanda's actions to the district attorney's office. Embezzlement of military funds. Attempted bribery of a witness. 2 charges that weren't just court drama, they were real consequences. She'd crossed lines that couldn't be softened by sob stories or legal maneuvering. I didn't look at her as the words sank in. I didn't need to. After the judge left, the room slowly emptied. People offered nods, a few handshakes. I accepted them quietly. None of it felt like a victory lap. This wasn't a win. It was a necessary ending. Outside, the sky was bright. No clouds, just a clean, open stretch of blue that felt almost unreal. Jacob walked beside me without saying much. His shoulders were straighter than they had been weeks ago. His eyes clearer. The haunted look had started to fade. The drive home was quiet. Not awkward, just peaceful. The kind of quiet that settles when you've come through a storm intact. As we pulled into the driveway, the house, our house, stood waiting. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like the first page of something new. The next few weeks weren't dramatic. No cinematic moment of transformation. Just steady, deliberate work. We started with the walls, painting over years of memories that didn't belong to us anymore. Amanda's color choices, her art, her influence, all of it was stripped out, one layer at a time. Jacob picked a dark navy for his room. I went with earth tones. Something stable. We rearranged the furniture, built new shelves, fixed the leaky faucet Amanda had ignored for months. We grilled dinner in the backyard. Watched old movies. Even just sitting on the couch felt different now, like the house had finally exhaled, and we could breathe with it. There were nights when Jacob still had trouble sleeping. Moments when I caught him staring off, lost in something I couldn't see. But he always came back. Always grounded himself again. Sometimes I'd wake up and find him sitting in the kitchen, working on something, a drawing, homework, a list of things he wanted to do now that everything had changed. I never pried. He talked when he needed to. And I listened. The town, slowly but surely, came around. Rumors died off. Stories changed. People who once avoided me now offered genuine hellos. A few apologized, awkward, but honest. I didn't hold grudges. I'd seen too much to waste energy on bitterness. Amanda never came back. Last I heard, she'd left town quietly while the criminal investigation moved forward. There were rumors about her lawyer dropping her, about new charges piling up. But I didn't dig. I didn't care. Nick was gone too. Like smoke. Like he'd never existed. But the damage they left behind, that was real. I saw it in the corners of Jacob's eyes. In the way certain songs made him pause. In the hesitation before he laughed, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to anymore. That damage wouldn't disappear overnight. But we were healing. Together. One evening, we sat on the porch. The sun was low, burning the sky into orange and gold. The neighborhood was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones and reminds you that peace isn't loud. It's steady. Earned. Jacob leaned against the railing, looking out over the street. The light hit his face just right, and for a second I saw the boy he used to be, before everything, before Amanda's betrayal, before the gang, before the silence. He turned toward me with a look that held a question, the kind that didn't need words. And in that moment, I felt it. I wasn't carrying the weight anymore. The burden, the betrayal, the chaos, all of it had finally started to slip away. I nodded slowly, the answer unspoken but clear. I was happy. Not because I'd won. Not because Amanda had lost. But because I'd fought for my son, and I hadn't failed. The war was over. And we were home.